So my name's Justin Ison. I am a software developer at Microsoft, formerly Six Wunderkinder in Berlin, Germany. We're the makers of Wunderlist. And then today, I guess I'm going to talk to you about the mobile grid and how to get started and set it up yourself. So the challenge. You have all these devices, but how will you test and what will you do with these? In each one of these test cases, you want to validate every single locale language your app supports. You want to validate every OS version your app supports. Sorry, I'm in the way of this, aren't I? And then validate different resolutions. Validate different screen sizes, phones, tablets, phablets, etc. Validate different device manufacturers. You could try the single test approach. You might end up like this. So, not recommended. Or the multi-threaded approach. Also, not recommended. Though this guy doesn't seem to mind. He's quite happy with doing this that way. So, still not recommended. You could hire an army of zombies. So, definitely not recommended. So what options do we have? Test automation, of course, that's why we're all here. But how, why, and where? So you can run your tests. So you do spend time, you create a test suite. But what do? You can run it single-threaded. You'll turn into this guy waiting for your test to finish. Still not recommended. Parallelization, of course. So that's why we have Appium, Selenium Grid, and they're very happy together. So you have a couple options when you run in parallel. You could run your tests on the cloud, and then I'll go through the pros and cons of doing that. So the pros are, it's definitely the present and it's the future of automated testing. As where the server-side world's going, everything's going to the cloud, like AWS, Azure, Google Cloud. So eventually everything, all your tests will be there as well. And it's going that direction now. Ease of setup and integration. So you write your test and that's it, you're done. You just push it to the cloud service and they run the test for you. Saves you on cost of having to buy all the different mobile devices and a machine to run them. Some test services give you really good analytics and reporting after your test run. Some services actually integrate well with cloud CI services like Travis CI. So you can, in theory, just if you're an Android developer or iOS developer, as soon as you commit to GitHub, it triggers a build on Travis. Travis runs. If the app builds, then it gets pushed to, like, for example, SauceLabs, and then all your tests run on SauceLabs, and you'd never have any machines internal in your network that actually had anything to do with testing. It was all done on the cloud. You expose your app to a much larger range of devices and operating systems by using the cloud. So the cons with doing that. It could be difficult sometimes to narrow down issues. You could have network problems. The network problems could be on your side. They could be on their side. They could be somewhere in between. And it's really difficult to figure out where that problem lies. You also have latency issues. Like, depending on where the cloud service is, it could be on the other side of the world from where you are, and it's obviously going to take longer to run your tests. Outages can occur. So like every service, the networks could go out. If they are on AWS could go out just like all the other services that are on AWS. So bugs in their software, so they could introduce bugs in software easily, just like we can. It happens. It's part of our world. Or they get acquired by another company and then shut down. And this has happened a couple of times. Costs. So if you have a rather large test suite, and you're going to run the entire test suite on every single commit, it could be quite expensive after a while. So here's some examples of existing cloud services. These are just at the top of my head. I'm sure there's a lot more. As you see, like AppWhack got acquired by Amazon and essentially just became Amazon Test Cloud. I think AppWhack, or one of these guys, they sent an email. They're like, "Good news, we got acquired. Bad news, we're shutting it down." So all the time that you spent like getting your test to run on their service, now you have to find an alternative. And then App Purify was Google. Now is Google Test Lab. So the mobile grid, the pros. You can run tests in a limited amount of time without actually worrying about costs. You can run them 1,000,000 times and not have to pay a single penny. You're not handcuffed to a cloud service 24/7 availability. You have all your test data local for debugging. So if you were testing on the cloud and one of their devices just reboots or just has some issues, you would have no idea why. All you would know is like your test failed, but you wouldn't really know why, because unless you maybe got some good reports from them, but not all of them give that information. But if it was local, you could actually go on the device, you could actually see the device and see it actually has problems, and you could go on and put on logcat or log in for instruments and see what's going on. You don't have latency issues. It's in your network, so everything should run quickly. And you don't expose your app or sensitive data to cloud if that was a concern for you. The cons. So just like the open source community on everything that we do, sometimes it's hard finding documentation or examples in the language that you program. And this is just the way it is. That's how open source is. So that could be tough. Takes a little bit of time to set up and smooth things out once you get it running. There's a lot of edge cases that are involved that you don't think about as you're setting it up, that you find out as you're running the test more and more, like on devices or simulators that you find out that you have to compensate. Require a little degree of ops knowledge, but not very much. You might expose your app to. You won't be able to expose your app to a large range of devices in OS like you could in some of these cloud services. And then you have to maintain and build the entire setup yourself, software and hardware. So anytime new OS versions come out, you have to upgrade them. You have to upgrade the phones. And then compensate for any changes that might occur because of these updates. Then you have to code your changes. Whereas like on the cloud services, they take care of this part for you. And then devices could be a real pain in the ass. They are your single point of failure. So if the device fails, then your test fails. So it can be a real challenge. So what I'll demo, show you how you get all your devices connected to your computer programmatically, launching your hub, Appium nodes programmatically, capture screenshots, logs, video, logcat for reporting, running single-threaded, running your test distributed, running your test in parallel. And then, so you should have multiple alternatives. Like you shouldn't just rely on the local grid. You should be able to send your tests to the cloud. And by doing that, I'll give you an example of how to send some of your tests to SauceLabs and leverage, so for example, you might have scenarios that are actually critical that you want to go to the cloud and expose it to. There are hundreds of devices that they have. And by doing this, you can only send your smoke test or your critical test that you want these scenarios covered there that you really care about. It'll generate an alert report with all the above attachments, metadata that I talked about. And then I'll show you the setup we have at Wunderlist. So let's briefly look at the core code of this. So don't worry, so if you see the examples here, I'll give you the URL to the repo after that has all this information. You can look at it on your own time. So here we got our methods to grab our Android devices and our iOS devices that are connected to our computer. We get the UDID, OS version, manufacturer, model, etc., and SDK versions. The big key here for parallelization is we give it a thread. We assign it a thread when we detect it. And then so I'm a Ruby developer. I use this parallelization library called Parallel. And it assigns you a test number environment variable, and that gives you the process, the value. It gives you which process your test is actually running on. So then I can match it to the device to the process, and that's how you connect it. So here's an example of some of the information that we capture when we connect the devices. At a minimum, you do need the UDID, but since this other information is there, you might as well grab it because it's important to know the OS version SDK. Here's our method to generate a node config JSON file. Here in this example, I think this has a laser pointer. There we go. So I set the browser name of just the UDID, which is nobody really knows what their UDID is. But you could actually, since you have this other information on the next slide, you could set the information to iPhone 6 or my iPhone. So when your grid console pops up, you could actually see which phones are actually running. So here's just a generated node config. So the beauty is Appium actually built in a grid node into the Appium server. So you don't have to set the separate the Selenium Java jar. You don't have to create a node from that. You just use the same Appium server you use to run your tests like singly, but you pass in this argument of node config. And here's some methods to start our hub, start Appium, and then launch our hub. And then here we assign our threads. So we want to know how many processes we want to start. So really, we only want to start as many processes as how many devices are connected. So here we assign it a threads environment variable. And then we launch all our nodes in parallel. So they all start at the same time. So of course, we want some more information. So we have some methods here to grab video from the device. Video only works on real devices, doesn't work on emulators. And we also then grab the logcat data from the device and emulator. So here's our spec helper methods, basically our setup methods for our tests. Here's where, going back, what I was talking to you about the test environment number from the Parallel library. Here's where, because at this point, my process is now already split into processes. I then could grab, based on the environment number that's being returned on that process, I can match it to the thread that it was assigned to when I got the devices. And then the set UDID environment variable, I'll show you on the next slide. And then we launch Appium, and then, or we match the process, like I said, and initialize Appium and its helper methods. So here's our setup. So the test is about to run. We want to set our UDID environment variable. Again, it doesn't have to be the UDID, and I'll show you on the next slide. So before each test, we want to start the video and start the logcat. Then after the test, stop the video and logcat. Because we only care about the beginning of the test and after the test. We don't want to record the whole session of your setup and your teardown. Really, it's just the small space that we're actually testing and is what we'll attach to the report. And then I only attach output on failures. If the test passes, I don't really care, but it's really up to you. If you want to always attach things, you can. So here's an example, and this is where the environment variable that we assign back here, right here, comes into play. Because without that, our scenario would run, and then if it failed, you wouldn't know which device it failed on. Because if you're running in parallel, all the devices are running the same tests, then you wouldn't know it was actually my iPhone or my Android device that actually it failed on. So you would like to know which device that the test failed on. So for Android. So you have an app, and you support it for so many different versions. you want to go and then install every one of the SDKs for that you support. And most importantly, if you're going to use emulators, you want to install the Haxum Intel accelerator. Without it, the emulators are impossible to use. You can't use them. So here we create our emulators based on the SDKs we just installed. Each one has a different version. So here we'll just run the test real quick on single test, thread test. And it's just running through tests. It should finish soon. So all the examples, there's only 2 tests. So that's to delete. OK, it's done. So that's kind of painful, right? It was, what, 48 seconds. Seemed longer. So that was pretty slow. This would be like you if you're always waiting for the test to finish. So that's why we distribute tests. You want to, so you have a whole test suite, and you have what's the quickest way is to distribute them. One device gets this test, another device gets this test, and they come back at the end. So it's the quickest way to run your test suite. Yeah, so again, all the examples, I only have 2 specs, 2 tests. So we only need 2 devices when we're running it distributed. The one on the left is an emulator. The one on the right is actually a device that I'm mirroring to the computer. Yeah, it's, well, I only have so much space. The output's not really the important part, but. Not currently for Appium, but there are lots of different projects doing that, Facebook namely, and I'll cover that later. Okay, so it's finished. So we went from 48 seconds to 27 seconds. So that's pretty good. I mean, if you had a large test suite, and it would be significant amount of time savings. So yeah, what I just said. So here's a quick example of the report. So we got in here, we have our one that passed. Doesn't have any attachments because I don't care. Here's our failure. So we have our Appium, our hub log, Appium log, logcat, screenshot. We got our specs that we generated before with all the device data information. And our video of the test. As you can see, it's just at the point where the test starts, and then it's going to end at the test stop. So it's not everything it's not launching the app or anything. And actually, I wanted to show you. So yeah, so right here, going back to what I was showing you, our UDID environment variable. So if you're running in parallel and you would have like a row of all these devices that had add note scenarios, and they all failed. But this here identifies which device actually it failed on. So here's an example for parallelization. And then in this example, we're going to send all the tests to every single emulator, so they'll all run the same tests. So this is just as fast as running it like single-threaded. And then again, these are the the emulators that we created before. Each one's running a different SDK version, so help make us feel warm and fuzzy inside knowing that we're covering what our app supports. So you can see all our nodes that were generated. The one on the bottom right is still that device that I'm mirroring. All the other ones are emulators. So watch this guy. This guy's going to have a hard time. Partially because, so my computer is only a 2-core, and I'm really pushing it to limits. I'm having 6 processes running, and which I assume is the reason why this guy is having a hard time, because when I run it single threaded, it's fine. But like a beefier machine, you shouldn't have this problem. I think this one is a, I don't know. I think it's 15. No, that doesn't make sense. I don't know. I'll have to look after. Yes. But it's actually good that this guy's going to have a problem because he's going to crash in a little bit, which is good, and then I'll show you why it's good. Still waiting for him, I think, to go, yeah. As you see, as the other one shut down, he seemed to kind of pick it up a little bit, so he's a little bit more energy. And we got our crash. So Grid 5 crashed. Let's look at the report. So again, here's all our failures. They ran on all different devices. So we know which device failed, but then specifically yellow is broken, and we know it's the 554 emulator that we saw. And there's all the ones that are passed. So again, we still have the hub log. It's not really important in this case. It's not the issue wasn't on the hub side. Again, we capture our Appium log. We don't really need it in this case, but our logcat is where it's key to have it. So there's a couple exceptions that have occurred. So this guy's definitely had some issues. I didn't try to debug this at all, but I assume this is the problem. So which is good about this. With Allure, if you have it on a Jenkins server in your work, or you could actually then just send this or attach all this to your bug report. So then the developer could go in and he has all this information. All right. So again, like I was saying, you should be able to leverage your tests. You shouldn't just rely on your local grid setup. You should have many different avenues that you could actually send your tests to help the overall quality of your app. So in this case, we're going to use SauceLabs, and we've tagged one of the tests with a tag of sauce, and that test will be pushed to SauceLabs. If you had a large test suite and you had multiple tags of sauce or whatever tag you call it, then you could obviously run it in parallel, such as distributed or in parallel. So this one is going, so it's running now in SauceLabs. If we click on the link, I don't know how many of you are familiar with SauceLabs, you can actually see the emulator running the test. So. So it runs. It's a little bit slow because it has to obviously go all the way to their server and back. So there's definitely latency involved. So we'll just skip that. So afterwards, you still get the information. Well, you get the information on your side. You get the assertion. So here, right there, right away, I know my test failed, and this is the reason why. But you don't get the metadata that you have, that you collect locally. But you can actually download the assets from SauceLabs after your test run, and then attach them to the report if you want. You could also get a link to where your job ran, and then click the link and get all that information if you don't want to do that. Here I have an example of a method to download the assets if that's what you want to do. I don't generally do it just because by the time I tell it to stop the test in SauceLabs to actually release the assets for me to download, it's a good 30 to 60 seconds after. So if you had a lot of tests, that would add up. It increase your time even more. Somebody was telling me they actually have like an internal way now that you could actually send your tests and they run it all internally. I haven't tried that approach yet. I've always just pushed my tests to it. All right, iOS. So what I'm going to show you is all about for real devices. I think if most people are familiar that you can only run one simulator per machine. Again, there's people working around that, and there's a lot of cool things coming up that are solving that problem. And I'll get into those in a little bit. So in order to run your tests, you just have to enable developer mode on your devices. Pair your device to the machine. It's just saying, I trust this computer. You have to then enable UI automation in the developer menu. And then ideally, you should connect a device that is running each operating system or OS version that your app supports. So let's just watch it real quick, run in parallel. So I just used Reflector to screencast it to my machine and then screen record. So these are running in parallel, so they're all running the same tests, but I have it set up to run in random order. And the good thing, if your framework has it, you should always have random order. It helps helps stop tests from being flaky, and you writing tests relying on other tests. It keeps your tests just good from not doing that. Yeah, well, this was before I left, so. And I think we're done now. And again, so we can generate a report. iOS UDIDs are the worst. And I mean, I'm not gonna recognize that's my device, and most people probably wouldn't either. So again, you could take the device name or some other type of identifier and put it here, and you'll know which device it is. I think here. So iOS doesn't have. There are ways, and there's some people that have attempted to figure out how to get to screen record on iOS. Like you could do it through QuickTime. I think somebody wrote a Apple script at one time, and it actually worked, but I think it's not supported anymore. So, and I don't know any alternatives right now. So here, you just get all the information that we can get, but whatever you can get, you could attach to it as well. So here, I'll just demo real quick what we have set up at Wunderlist. This is our specs of our CI machine here. We'll watch it run real quick. So here it's running on real devices, obviously, and it's running in distributed mode. So every device is running a different test. And so the good thing, again, with distributed, like if I ran it in single thread, the test suite would take about 40 minutes, 35 to 40 minutes to complete. By doing this, it's done in around 5 minutes. So. This one's Android, yeah. So, sorry. You can real devices. That's what I did here. These are real devices. They're how exact same way as you do with Android. Yeah. So you spawn an iOS up onto an Android node or onto an Appium node. It's just a node on the hub. You send your test in parallel to the hub. The hub queues it and then sends it off to the device, just like you do on Android, or how I have it set up for Android. And at the end, I'll give you the repo, and it has this entire test suite in it with the actual apps, and so you could test it yourself, run it yourself. All right. Here it is with Android emulators. So when we run our smoke tests, or just our critical tests, I run it always on emulators because they're just quick. I could spawn up more of them. And some other benefits, which I'll get into in a second. So, yep. So they're just all running different tests. So we'll move on. So here's just an example. The same thing as what I showed you before, with a little bit more data that we capture, just showing you what else you can do. So here I capture the standard out before the test runs. So I just capture like anything that. So I create all my users and all my data before the test run through the API, and I capture that output. Any other standard out and like the device information, the video PID, logcat PID, screenshot. So like in this case, the screenshot doesn't help, but the video tells everything that happens. So that's why video is like the key to, or you always have to have video in my opinion. It's the number one thing. It's worth a million words. So here's our logcat. I don't know if this particular issue gave us any reason, but then this is good because now I'm actually like going onto the server. I'm grabbing all our what we're sending to the server and I'm pulling it back and then putting it into a file and attaching it to the log. What I don't have in here is what we also do is we go onto the emulator and we could grab all the app files that are on the emulator, like the database files, pull those off and put them into the report. You can only do it on emulators. You can't do it on devices unless you root it because you don't have permission to get to where they put the files, but you can on emulators. So some of the challenges that I've had: ADB disconnects. 1 second, or 1 second your device is connected to ADB, the next it's disconnected or offline, and there's no reason why you can't. So to solve this problem, I reboot the USB hub before every test run. And by doing this, or the reason why I do this is everything I read on Stack Overflow or any site explaining this issue, because this is a very common issue across the community, is they're like, oh, just unplug it, unplug the USB cable and plug it back in. That will reconnect ADB. Well, how do you do that for your CI system? So I have a programmable power strip, and I just toggle the power on the USB hub, and it reconnects ADB. Wi-Fi issues. So before every test run, I toggle airplane mode off or on, and then toggle it off, and that refreshes the Wi-Fi connection. Some reason, I don't know why, the Android devices, after a while, they're connected. I think the connection gets stale. And if you look at the device, you'll see the wavy lines, and then you'll just see an exclamation mark right in the middle, and you're like, it's still connected to the router, but it can't get to the internet. And I don't know if it's something on the router side or something on the device side. But my solution was I'll just toggle airplane mode. That refreshes the internet connection, and it works. You might not care about Wi-Fi if your app's just internal, it doesn't talk to web services, then it doesn't matter. but my app unfortunately talks to web services, so I have to have internet. Other possible solutions for Wi-Fi, you can reverse USB tether the device. So basically that means you could get the internet connection from your computer and do it through the USB cable. But you have to root the phone, which I didn't want to do. Wi-Fi, there are Wi-Fi connection apps that help keep the connection, but I wasn't able to find one that actually really worked all the time. I've also tried using multiple routers on different channels, thinking that maybe they're interfering with each other, but that didn't help because eventually I'd set half on one router, the other half on another router, but they would end up disconnecting eventually anyway, or yeah, disconnecting from the internet. So alternatives to real device. Android Studio emulators, which we already demoed. Can't video record, but I'm actually working on a solution for this. Almost finished, just whenever I have time, I will open source it. Big plus, like I was saying before, is you have access to where your app stores its files, and you can pull it off the device, off the emulator, and then attach to your report, which then you should be able to give everything the developer actually needs to help solve the issue. Another downfall is what you saw with my machine was if you starting a whole bunch of them, it actually eats up a lot of your memory. So you have to have a beefy machine. There are other emulators that people make that you can buy. One is Genymotion. It's actually pretty close to a real device. It has a recording feature, but no way of no API or CLI to start the recording. So it's unfortunate that you can't do that. And then some devices that I've had are just erratic, like they just randomly reboot. Won't connect to ADB or will connect to ADB like once and won't be able to connect again. I've had devices that when you're sending a string into a text field, it would just put like one extra character of a certain character on a sentence, and you try to compare the assertion because it will fail because it's trying to compare, and you're like, I don't see anything wrong, but then there'll just be one extra letter in there. So I've had devices do that. And then just battery issues. After being connected to these hubs for like days and months, they just kills the battery after a while. So some things to be excited about, mostly for iOS. As you guys probably, I don't know if you've seen at the Selenium conference in Portland this year, Facebook introduced two things, XE tool, replacement for Xcode build, and then their WebDriver agent, which you could also have multiple simulators running at once on the same machine. Here's another repo, this guy Parallel iOS tests. I've only briefly looked at it. Looks like some people like it. It has a lot of stars in GitHub. And I think he grabbed some of the logic from what the Facebook guys are doing. But it's another thing for if you guys are interested to look at. And then, so Appium, in the future release, they are actually starting to build this XC unit test that Apple introduced in their last Xcode version to replace UI automation. I don't know, I should have asked some other people that may have known that if they're actually going to do what Facebook is doing and have multiple simulators. I hope so, I think I heard that, but I can't say for certain. And then this is pretty cool. This OpenSDF. It's open source. It's basically you could turn your computer or your device lab into like Perfecto Mobile. You could have all your devices into like a server in another room, and you just go to your desk, open up a browser, and control any other device you want, install files. You could have this set up, and then basically only let the ones that are actually not running, available on this platform. So it's pretty impressive, and it's all open source. This guy's still waiting for his test to finish. So lastly, I just want to say some thank yous. I think we should all say thank you to the Selenium open source developers and the community who make WebDriver happen for us. Dan Coulier, He's the creator of Appium. He's actually here at the conference. If you see Dan, just go up and just give him a big bear hug. Don't even say anything. He'll love it. And then, like, lastly, like without people like Dan and people like him and all the open source developers, we would never have these tools. And it really helps make our jobs easier, more efficient. And lastly, they're free. So I think we owe them a lot. So thank you. So. Any questions? Right. Yeah, I've had devices that just, whatever reason, they will just put in an extra character. Yeah. Well, no, randomly. Yeah. I don't know. It's yeah. I don't know. It's always that one device that I've had. Yeah. Yeah. It was like an older LG phone, and I actually liked the phone. It worked well for automation, but it always put this extra character in, and then a test would fail because it did the assertion and it didn't match. So, yeah.
I've used the XC tool and I find it quite good to build iOS builds. And actually we have a configuration that like we have a iOS machine rented from one stadium. We use iOS simulator and we just start and stop Appium for different configurations. For example, we have like 3 app configuration for different versions of server, the production version, staging version, AC. We just start stop node and start stop Appium, and it's quite working fine. I mean, without errors, but it's not efficient for time consuming.
Yeah.
Tests are running. You have to wait like another few ways for 1 hour from now.
Yeah. Yeah, and so far that's why I've preferred to use just real devices hooked to the machine. I mean, you could have a USB hub. Like we have a 9-port USB hub, so I could plug in 9 iOS devices. It's a 6-core machine, so technically I could plug up to 12 iPhones and have 12 processes running. No, it's just in one of our offices, just in there. People like to look at it and see it blink and the device is moving. So, but you could put it in the server room. So, like just like this cloud services, they put them in these like huge racks, and they're all like just on top of each other.
And how much is it efficient to have it on and not use like SauceLabs? Is it for which level of tests, for which amount of tests is more efficient to have all solutions with real devices with servers and not ran from?
It's really up to you. It's what you want to do. Like I was saying, I think like if you had some certain scenarios and or some certain screens that or just some certain tests that you wanted to have these run on like many different OSs and different devices, then you could tag these tests and only send those tests instead of sending all your entire tests, your entire suite over it. Hopefully that answered your question. Yeah, so, okay. Anyone else? Sure.
Is there any way to run the tests in distributed mode? Not to run the same test on each device, but like kind of separated or distributed in some way?
Yeah, so you mean just having one device run one test, another device runs another test in your suite? Yeah, and actually I'll show you. This is the example. So this one is distributed. One on the left is going to run one test, and the other is going to run the other test. That reduces your total runtime almost in half. Yeah, I think it was, 48 seconds to 27 seconds. So. Anyone else? Sure. It's so built into Android SDK on the exactly. It's got I think it's called screencasts, ADB screencasts. Here I could show you the code for it. Yeah, right here. So yeah, so all we're doing is passing in the UDID. We're just doing a shell screen record, and then after the end, we pull it off the device. So you, you mean like delete the file, pull the file off, or so? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, because of a previous test. Yeah, I mean, but that goes more back to your like test design, your test suite design. So when you create the test, you don't want your test to rely on another test, and you don't want your other test to fail your other test because of data. So yeah. Oh, you mean autocomplete? Yeah. So there are ways of turning off autocomplete. Um, I don't remember offhand, but you can do it. Yeah. So you have to go into device settings. On Android, you go into general whatever the settings, and the keyboard you can say and disable autocomplete. And then iOS has it too, I'm sure somewhere. Just can't tell you exactly where, but no. No, yeah, you don't have access. Well, Android, you could probably do it. iOS, you don't. iOS only gives you access to your app. You can't go into the helper or into settings.
Just help us to understand better. You use one Mac without any virtual machines and connect to it different iPhones and use multiple emulators. But do you have any issues with instruments? Because even with one single device, it would crash and stuff like that. How it behave with multiple devices?
Good question. So far, it's been fine. Like so with Appium, I actually have separate Appium servers that are nodes running, and they're talking to instruments, and they're on a separate process. So instruments, I guess at this point, is on a separate process talking to this Appium node, and it's running, and then another Appium node's running and talking to instruments. This logic's baked into Appium, I guess. I don't know the internals of it, but yeah, as you saw, I was able to run 3. I've run 4 on this before, and it's fine. I don't have any problems with the instruments. Sorry? I have not tried that, no. Yeah, 'cause so far, I mean, I built this solution before XC tests came out, and this works for us. Eventually, I would like to have multiple simulators on one machine, but I just haven't gotten the time to do that yet. So, yeah. Here, I'll show you. And I'll share these slides after too, so you'll have this information. All right, where did it go? I think it's frozen. There. All right, right there. So it's called Energiny. So the good thing about that is I could control almost everything remotely. So I'm at my desk. I want to restart the CI machine. I could just go onto it has a little web server in it, and I just could reboot the computer, I could reboot the hubs, the router, everything that's plugged into it. So it's a nice thing to have. Anything else? All right, well, thank you. So.